I really appreciate Norm's introduction, and I particularly appreciate Lance and Susie and the other hosts for having us over tonight and having you guys all over to tell you a little bit more about Atlas Corps, a little bit more about what I've been up to the last couple of years, and kind of where things are going in the future. So my international nonprofit organization is called Atlas Service Corps, or we just refer to it as Atlas Corps because that's the domain name and it sounds a lot like the Peace Corps. So there's this an idea that was developed when we were living in New Delhi, India. And I was working for the US State Department there on an amazing assignment working on anti-human trafficking, or fighting against modern-day slavery, as they call it. The buying and selling of women in India is a horrible issue, and one the US government's put a lot of effort into, and one I had the blessing and the opportunity to help be a part of that fight. And I was meeting incredible nonprofit leaders there, social sector leaders, and I was in a position to give them money and to give them ideas. It's always a good position to be in, to be able to give people money and the pretense of being able to give them ideas. And I met, through this work and some other nonprofits I was working with in India, some folks who were developing the Indian AmeriCorps. Now AmeriCorps, some of you may know, is a little bit like the Domestic Peace Corps, it's Volunteers in Service to America, the AmeriCorps Vista program. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be neat if India had a Peace Corps? At the same time, I'm reading Thomas Friedman and reading about how the world is flat. And Thomas Friedman loves India, as my wife and I loved India. And I'm reading about how the world is flat, and I'm thinking to myself, the world's flat in the private sector. A guy goes from India, goes to Seattle and invents Hotmail. He becomes a millionaire, Gates becomes like a billionaire, and you and I all benefit because we can email our grandmothers for free, except when they actually come, which is even better. But in the absence of coming, email is nice. The private sector does this all the time. Private sector finds good ideas and talented people and they cross borders. When those ideas and people cross borders, it grows businesses, it grows economies, and we all benefit. This is the globalization in the last 10 years, which admittedly has had some rough spots in the last few months. But for the most part, when ideas cross borders, we benefit. It's in the government sector. Diplomats like my wife cross borders and work on issues across the world, and we benefit from these transfer of people and ideas. Even in the religious sector. I can't tell you how many religious visas come out of India, but people cross borders and spread their faith, and we all are strengthened by that. Even in the academic sector, the best people around the world go to schools like Washington University, and Washington University benefits and the students benefit, and they go back to their countries. But what about the nonprofit sector? Why is it that for 47 years we've sent Americans abroad with no even notion or thought or second guess about people coming this way? So I first started developing Atlas Corps. I would occasionally call it a reverse Peace Corps, because in many ways that's the focus of our program. Global South or developing world leaders coming to the United States. I stopped saying that though when I described it as a reverse Peace Corps to a guy in India, and he said to me, "But why are you against peace?" So in developing this idea in New Delhi, India, we brought over people from the State Department, from USAID, from Ashoka, from the Indian nonprofit sector, and developed what this organization would look like. Dining room conversations, literally cocktail parties like this, just talking about how we would change the world, how we would do things if we were courageous enough to take that step. But these ideas kept getting speed, and I thought, clearly someone else must be doing this. This idea is far too simple, perhaps far too good, for someone not to be doing the program that we're doing. So I did research. I had no intention of just leaving a secure job to do something that someone else was doing better than perhaps I could have. But what I found out was that there's two big reasons why a program like Atlas Corps has never existed in the past, and why I think I'm quite lucky and things are going so well now, is that the visa's complicated and the financing's complicated. Now I won't go into much detail about the visa because it's kind of makes your eyes glaze over and gets kind of boring, but trust me, if you're a nonprofit leader in India or Colombia or South Africa or Brazil or China or you name the country outside of Europe, if you want to come volunteer in the United States for a year, good luck. Not going to happen. Second is the financing. It's a lot cheaper for America to send people to Kenya for a year than it is to send Kenyans here, because DC is an expensive place to live. And Nairobi, less so. So you had to figure out a way to get over the financing issues as well. But having worked at Ashoka and worked on the social enterprise field for a while, we developed this model where we would bring over leaders who were so talented, who were so inspiring, who had so much skills that organizations would pay to have those leaders at their organizations for a year. The Grammy Foundation, Muhammad Yunus won the Nobel Peace Prize just 2 years ago, works on microfinance issues. Not Muhammad Yunus, I haven't met him once, but I didn't have this conversation with him. But the Grammy Foundation said to me, we want microfinance leaders from overseas. So they don't want smart kids, they want talented microfinance leaders from overseas. And if you bring them to us, we'll pay you $26,000 for each one of those fellows. Well, it cost me about $40. That's covering almost 2/3 of my expenses. We figured out how to finance it, at least the majority of it, through program fees. And what we're doing in Atlas Corps is we're, in a very small way, or perhaps really in a very big way, by helping Atlas Corps get off the ground, we're embracing a concept of partnership and humility and progress which will benefit us all. We're endorsing this concept that we're all citizens on this planet. We're all struggling in different ways. And while we may not know the solutions to the problems that we face, we know in our heart that those solutions can be found through cooperation and through working together and through knowing your neighbor and through working together on these issues. It's just an inherent aspect of Atlas Corps. No one society has a monopoly on good ideas. And that together we are all stronger when we work together. Atlas Corps is leading the way in this promotion of international cooperation. And we're doing it in a way that is sustainable and innovative and scalable. We may feel insulated from the world's events around us. Sometimes we would even choose to embrace this notion that we are powerless. We would choose to embrace the notion that we can't address homelessness or we can't address globalization. But really, I believe that we have so much more power than we're willing to accept. That we have the ability to change the world. And when we accept this notion of power, then we become responsible for the way the world is, which is a really kind of a scary thought. It's better to say, I have no control. I have no influence over the world. But the fact is, I've seen it countless times, time and time again. When people step up and embrace the notion that they can make a difference, through small donations, through getting involved, through opening themselves up to the challenges of the world, directly in our community, that individually and collectively we can make the biggest mark. I just want to thank you for coming out tonight, for considering supporting Atlas Corps.